No, I'm doing the end.
You're doing the end, okay?
Fuck's sake. I mean, some of, the way Leonard and John worked, it was painful.
I see an industry to some degree in crisis.
Got to get me an appointment. This is the worst haircut I've ever had.
I have my own feelings about some of the things that's led to the problems that the industry has.
It was probably really just with Victoria Beckham. But even that was a blow dry.
That they paid $600, $700, and I'm seeing a 10-minute haircut. For me, it's worth learning how to do it properly.
But I don't believe that's where the downfall of hairdressing has come from.
Welcome to our podcast with me, Michael Van Clarke, and...
No, I'm doing the end.
You're doing the end, okay?
Fuck's sake.
All right.
Go.
Welcome to our podcast with me, Michael Van Clarke.
And me, Nicky Clarke.
Dry cutting is how we've always worked. So Leonard would have been working through the 50s where hair was cut dry.
Yep.
Sassoon changed all that with wet cutting,
yep,
with his revolution in the 60s. But Leonard stayed with dry cutting, and that's really where the heritage through John and through us has continued.
Yeah.
So how did Leonard put that method across?
Because, there is a slight misconception about the dry bit. I mean, it is dry haircutting, but what would have been done in the 50s was the cut really was only about making it do whatever you wanted it to do in order for you to set it. So whether it was done with scissors or thinning scissors or razors, it was all about just getting it to how you wanted it to be for that end result. It wasn't really about the importance of it. I mean, even, when they would, put it in Marcel waves and stuff, it was all just thinned out.
The haircut on its own wouldn't have stood up to itself.
Exactly.
It had
to have that set to do it. So, what Vidal has done has come in from the point of view of, from his belief in modernism, that whole Bauhaus movement and those designers that I said before, Courrèges, Cardin, Paco Rabanne, and Quant, of course, that was all about that kind of precision. So, of course, everything changed, like most revolutions. Hair was now suddenly soaking wet. Scissors were this big, and tiny, and it was
flat,
all about
precision,
that precision.
lines.
The point of it is that, in my belief, and I think it was in Leonard's as well, is that only works when you're then going to dry into that particular haircut, because they don't really stand up as much on their own either. It does stand up if you've got straight hair, but the physical thing of cutting wet hair, where you've got that precision, you don't have that same precision when you're putting layers into it, because it doesn't sit as well, because you're getting the marks and stuff like that. But it does work when you've kind of demoned it all in. What Leonard did was and I think in a slightly sort of over confused way, and I'd like to say that I've sort of simplified it down, is that it was about towel drying it. So you do, the wet bit was really your just, it was a bit of a waste of time when I did, but I mean, I do it in a way that is called a rough sketch. But it was all about towel drying and seeing how it moved. So what you did, it being dry, was actually to see how it moved. Now, some of that has been taken in different forms. I mean, people like John Sahag and stuff would be doing it dry, but before anybody did anything, everything was bolted dead straight with a pair of irons. So what he was doing is he was cutting it dry, but he might as well have been cutting it wet. Because what's the point of that? You're not seeing how that hair moves. You've just got an assistant to just, do it all. And it just becomes that kind of New York-y, although he's very good, but it just becomes that gimmicky thing. The whole point of being able to do things dry was that it allowed you to see how it moved. But having said that, you can fast track it, and that's what I think I did. I mean, some of the way Leonard and John worked, it was painful to watch. It was like hours and hours and hours of stuff that didn't really mean anything, But I thought they were geniuses, and John was a genius, but very long-winded way for certain things.
But I think that's the problem. If you only ever work on wet hair, you don't get a feel for what hair should feel like and behave like, because you're going from wet to finished blow dried or finished styled, and neither are natural.
Yeah.
So you actually don't get a sense of what hair should be like, what
It's
it
very
should
funny.
feel
Actually.
like.
I've got a client. She was in last week actually, and I've done it for 30 odd years, and she's always must be 30 odd years. I mean, she's always one of those people that never ever tells you what she wants. You do it, whatever you want. You just do it. You can do anything. And she sits there, she's got her eyes shut the whole time. And at the end of it, it's fabulous. And she said, whatever. And there was one time, I remember in Mount Street, I could hear a commotion. She's come in. It's the first time ever she got somebody else to cut her hair. You've got to get me an appointment. This is the worst haircut I've ever had. You know, she'd had this haircut. And kept going on about the worst haircut she'd ever had. Anyway, so we fitted her in and sat her down. I was reminding her about it last week. And I said, this isn't actually a bad haircut. It's actually a really, really good haircut. It's just the wrong haircut for you. Mm. And I imagine what's gone and happened is somebody's gone and cut, you know, they've done their thing, wet cut it. She sat there with her eyes shut the whole time. Mm. They've blow dried it. And she's gone, that's fabulous. And then when she's gone home, it's like all over the place. Because she does have difficult hair in the sense that bits that are just random curly bits with straight bits. So you really got to cut this dry, you know, because you would never see that. But what people would determine as a good haircut, you know, remember the amount of teachers that would come over and then before they say anything, they go and start doing all this and checking. What are you doing that for? Look at it. I don't need to do that. I mean, is that what you determine as a good haircut? If I go, I got a straight edge.
That's how they used to judge competitions, didn't they? So you used to get a ruler. And,
so that's my point. She's gone and had this, and wet or blow dried, it's actually it was all right. But because I know her, I just know that that's not what she does. You know, she'll be drying bits of it, and she's gone, and it's all over the place. It will look like there was bits that are longer than short. Do you know what I mean? Because it's just somebody that doesn't work like that. So how did we get onto that one? Yeah.
Well, I think just. I mean, I see an industry to some degree in crisis now. You know, we've had protests in Parliament Square. I have my own feelings about some of the things that's led to the problems that the industry has. And I think a big one is this seductive drive to get quicker and quicker at cutting hair.
Really?
Yeah, I think that... What you've seen over the last 30 years, you go back 30 years, a lot of us were, you know, pushing the boundaries to sculpt hair, to do layered haircuts, and most of the industry, and along with colleges as well, were looking for quicker, cheaper ways to do hair. Quicker to teach, quicker to execute. I mean, and most haircuts now are based on an A-line. But hold on,
what do you do when you say the industry in crisis? What bit are you referring to, in terms of the way they do hair, or the fact that they're, you know, this is a different?
I think the artistry of cutting hair has been put to one side, and the cutting of hair has been dumbed down to become very simplistic and much more relying on dressing hair.
Yeah,
so one-length haircuts or stacked bobs that are then shredded to pretend they're layers that they're not. They're just steps. Very quick to do. 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
No, I don't disagree with that part of it. I mean, I see some stuff. I mean, I watched one on Instagram the other day. I mean, I literally was laughing out loud. I mean, it went from this incredibly, bombastic way of doing it, and it went straight from this cutting to a finished result. Yeah. That all been waved and curled. I mean, it was like, I'm sorry, that is not going to look like that.
From a client's point of view, if the haircuts gets quicker and quicker and simpler, and it's all about styling, there's less need to rely on the hairdressers. There's less need to go back as quickly. I mean, I had a client recently, a journalist actually, who came in with, she had very wavy hair. She called herself Twizzle and referred to her hair like a Christmas tree because she had an A-line bob, a stacked A-line bob here and another one here. The interesting thing she said to me was that, you know, back in the 80s, because I shaped her hair properly, it probably took me about an hour. It was very thick hair. Back in the 80s, the haircut used to take as long as the colour, the highlights. But over the years, it got to the point where her haircut took 10 minutes, the colour still took as long.
Yeah, I mean, listen,
And for a lot of people, that's not really enough of a reason to go back to the hairdresser regularly.
Listen, I mean, I think what you're saying is all correct. I'm just not sure that that's the reason that it's happened.
No,
I
it's
mean,
one of the
maybe
reasons.
it's the thing is that there is a cycle for things to be, that are fashionable, and it's been a while since a haircut becomes I mean, the question that I get asked so often, one of them is always about, what makes an iconic haircut,
Yeah.
and I always will take it right back. I'll go, okay, here are the ones that we'll go. Let's go right back to say, well, let's start with Farrah, shall we, at 75?
Yeah.
You'll go, there's, you've got the Farrah Fawcett's, you've got the Meg Ryans, you've got the Purdeys, you've got the, I've gone Alzheimer's already. There's a bunch of those, those kind of ones. I worked it out that it's pretty much about every 6 or 7 years you'll get them. And the thing that connects most of them are, the Rachel and another one I just thought of, is that they're usually on not brunettes. They don't have to be blondes, but they're on.
You
You
see
can see
it better.
exactly, and they're usually, and this is the big key thing, is that it works on young and old. So you think of all those ones that, where the ones I've just said, I've done a couple of those where you've got the Selena Scott one, the Anthea Turner one. You get these things that they can be adapted. The Rachel, or the Meg Ryan, for instance, you'll get an edgier version or a slightly dumb version, or the Rachel. All those, there's always
And they become an iconic haircut.
They become an
that people
iconic
ask
haircut.
for.
Yeah.
What was the period?
No, but that has stopped.
Yeah,
quite a while
but tell
ago.
me, what was the period for iconic haircuts? From when to when do you think they fizzled out?
Well, I'll tell you exactly when it was, because I remember the last time I kind of tried to answer it was, I think, when it was probably really just with Victoria Beckham. But even that was a blow dry.
Yeah.
And you kind of go, I mean, unless maybe when she had that pop thing.
Yeah.
But how long ago is that?
So,
Then what-
so
so-
when did it start?
No, because it started, I think it stopped because it's quite difficult to come up with iconic haircuts. I mean, you can redo, I mean, even the Selena one that I did, I can't say it's anything more than an updated version of that terrible Purdey one, that I assisted on. But,
My feeling,
but
is
that it becomes a,
my feeling is that the heyday of hairdressing, it marries in with a period when there were iconic haircuts.
yeah, but that's
From the 60s
but
probably
that's
to
his
the
fault.
early 90s.
No, but that's part of the reason that it doesn't happen now, because there is a point where, if you look at the magazines, they would never ever be taking kind of hairdressy sort of pictures. They take them off a runway because they wanted that spontaneity.
Yeah, now.
They wanted that kind of feeling that they didn't want it to look hairdressy. What became a nonsense was because when you're trying to get a journalist, try and match a kind of a trend to where Eugene's gone and put, balloons and made them all electric, because it's just fun. It's got nothing to do with trends, but they're the pictures they're using because they don't want to use boring hair pictures. And that's how haircuts have become as well. And so some of the fault is that people just did not want to have hair looking like haircuts. They just wanted that loose thing. And so what then happened is, of course, you've got, as you point out, styling takes over because we've got products everywhere, but also colour takes over, and that's the huge thing of that, of being able to do things that you wouldn't be able to have done before. Things with crazy colour that become acceptable across a generation as well. So I think part of it is that people just don't want it to be too hairdressy, and haircuts become too hairdressy. They're a bit too, like the sort of things you'd get in a hair mag, becomes too much. But we know that actually you have to have some of that, because it doesn't just work. You've got to be able to cut hair properly.
Yes, there are still hairdressers charging a lot of money for a haircut, but the actual haircut is not much different to what they can get in a high street. It's based on an A-line bob, and it's stacked. And I get it. I get these clients coming from other countries that they've paid $600, $700, and I'm seeing a 10-minute haircut. And they're not stupid. Why would they keep going back to a salon every 5 or 6 weeks for that?
Yeah.
And it comes down to the teaching, because actually the reason so many clients come to us for properly sculpted hair is because for 30 years, hairdressing's not been teaching how to lay your hair properly. And so you have a whole generation of hairdressers now that are doing quite basic haircuts that are not really good enough for a lot of people.
The trouble is, Michael, is that...
And they can't charge enough for it because it's not exceptional.
No, I agree. But you know what your biggest problem is going to be, though, is that physically it's a lot easier to cut with wet hair.
Really, the diamond dry cut allows you to sculpt any shape that you choose in your mind's eye, perfectly layered with precision, to actually achieve a shape that works for the client, so it looks better, easier for them to manage, lasts longer between haircuts. You know, that's the ideal. And it's not a particular style, it's any style, but it allows you to sculpt in 3 dimensions.
We know
whereas most hairdressing training simplifies it by taking it into 2 dimensions. It's a flat line. It's about lines.
I think you
rather than 3 dimensions.
You've got this thing about your thing. I mean, that's not how I see it, but I see it similarly. It's the what's confusing is the diamond thing, which you have encapsulated, because that's easier to teach, it's basically that this method is not based upon a haircut. What it is it's about your divide. It's how do you divide up a
curved surface.
So you have pretty much if you draw a line, from the top of your ear like this, if you take out the hairline, you have got a dome tilted at an angle. Half a dome tilted at an angle. The only way you can divide a dome...
Half a sphere,
a sphere is with... Technically, it's called geodesic sections, or simplified, it's called in diamond form. So it was a Leonard diamond method, I knew, or John, went back to the original. But it's what it basically says is that it's not about saying, here's a haircut, and this is how we're going to teach you how to do this haircut. That's much easier to teach, especially in the Far East. I mean, trust me. I mean, I've been...
No, I'm not saying
they want to go, just tell me how to do this haircut.
I'm not saying it's not easier... The reason hairdressing's gone the way it has is constantly trying to find an easier way to do a haircut, but it's very limiting. Yeah, but it means that
but it's also the fact that, Mike, it's very tricky when you say to somebody that it's the same sections for every single haircut. They will look at you very weirdly. I can do it now because I have a back catalogue of 10,000 pictures and go, I've used the same method on all of them. Yeah. So you can it's believable because of that. People can't get their head around it. I've had it with so many people saying to me, they can't get their head around it. They can't get their head around it. It's the same sections. Because you're not going by the haircut. What our method tells you to do doesn't tell you how to do a haircut. Doesn't tell you where to take this much, that much. It's only telling you how to take the section. When you take that section, if you want to cut it on the neck, lift it up, cut bits out of it, that's your business. It's relying on you to think about it. And that's very difficult to teach.
Yeah, it requires more thought and more artistry.
Absolutely. It's very difficult to tell somebody it's the same sections all the time. I can't tell you how many times
that's why it takes longer to teach. And it's why...
It shouldn't do, because people can't believe it's that simple.
No, but in the sense that it requires more feel.
Yes, that's
and
true.
more judgment.
Yes.
And that's why it's worth more, and why clients are prepared to pay more.
Has that. What a lot of people want to just go, I get all that, mate, but just tell me how to cut this haircut. Tell me how to do this haircut. I know it because I see it all the time. It's almost, I mean, I've watched John, in trying to have a translator keep up with him and go on about the subtleties that you and I would talk about, and the interpreter would narrow it down to about, 3 Japanese words. And it's, just tell me, that's why it's tricky. And it works for Leonard, it works for me, it works for you, it works for John, and it works for people taking their bits out of it. I mean, I've taken bits out of it all the time, but you're right, it has to have a feel. But it's much, much more difficult to physically teach somebody to work with dry hair. It goes all over the place.
It is an art.
I know it's an art.
And that's why.
But not everybody wants to be
no, they're not
that level.
But for me, it's worth learning how to do it properly.
But I don't believe that's where the downfall of hairdressing has come from. I think
I'm not saying the downfall. I'm saying it's caused a problem in the industry in that what hairdressers are offering a lot of it clients can do themselves at home. If
You're
it's based
right
on
about
styling,
all of that.
clients can do that themselves at home. Let's wrap that there.
Okay.
And we can continue that on our next
So
discussion.
you're telling me to shut up, Michael?
Yes.